The snow fell in thick curtains across the main street of Yuba City, California, and through it stumbled a young woman whose voice rang clearer than any church bell, singing a carol about silent nights and holy peace, while her bare fingers clutched a tin cup that held only 3 pennies and a button someone had dropped in by mistake. Faye Patterson stood outside the Mercantile, her worn brown dress doing little against the December cold of 1878, her boots so thin she could feel every pebble beneath the snow. She had been singing for 2 hours now, and the cold had settled so deep into her bones that she wondered if she would ever feel warm again. Her breath came out in white puffs as she sang, her voice trembling not from nerves, but from the violent shivers that racked her slender frame. She was 20 years old and alone in a world that had little mercy for women without family or fortune. 6 months ago, she had buried her father after a fever took him, and the small farm they had worked together outside of town had been seized by the bank for unpaid debts she had not even known existed until men came with papers and hard expressions. Everything she owned now fit in a carpet bag hidden behind the Mercantile, and she had been sleeping in the church vestibule when the pastor was not looking, sneaking out before dawn each morning. The song she sang now was one her mother had taught her before consumption claimed her when Faye was just 12. The melody spoke of comfort and joy, of tidings and good cheer, and she poured every ounce of longing in her heart into those notes, because if she stopped singing, she would have to face the reality that she had nowhere to go and no idea how she would eat tomorrow. A few townspeople hurried past, heads down against the wind, and one woman dropped a nickel into her cup without looking at her face. Faye nodded her thanks and kept singing, transitioning into a slower carol about a child in a manger. Her voice carried down the snow-covered street, past the saloon where piano music competed with her melody, past the hotel where warm lamplight glowed in every window, past the telegraph office and the bank and the doctor's practice. She did not notice the man who had stopped his horse in the middle of the street, sitting perfectly still in his saddle as her voice washed over him like summer rain. Cooper Remington had come into town for supplies, his wagon waiting at the feed store to be loaded with grain and salt, and the 100 other things his ranch needed to get through the winter. He was 32 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled at his collar and gray eyes that had seen too much hardship to smile easily. His ranch, the Double R, sprawled across 3,000 acres of California grassland, home to 500 head of cattle and a dozen horses that he had bred and trained himself. He was not a man given to sentiment or sudden decisions. Everything he had built, he had earned through backbreaking work and careful planning. When his parents died of cholera when he was 19, he had taken their small homestead and turned it into something substantial through sheer determination, and a refusal to quit even when drought or disease or falling beef prices threatened to destroy everything he had worked for. But now he sat frozen in his saddle, listening to a voice that seemed to reach inside his chest and wrap around his heart with gentle fingers. The song was familiar, one he had heard in churches and at Christmas gatherings, but he had never heard it sung like this, with such raw emotion that it transformed the simple carol into something almost unbearably beautiful. He urged his horse forward slowly, not wanting to startle the singer or interrupt the song. As he drew closer, he saw her clearly for the first time, a slender young woman with dark blonde hair that hung in damp tangles around her face, her lips blue with cold, her entire body shaking as she sang. Her dress was threadbare and patched in several places, and she wore no coat despite the freezing temperature. Something twisted in Cooper's chest as he watched her, this fragile creature singing her heart out in the snow with a desperation that spoke of profound need. He had seen poverty before, had lived through lean times himself, but there was something about her dignity in the face of such obvious hardship that moved him in ways he could not quite understand. She finished the song and drew a shaking breath, preparing to start another, when she finally noticed him watching her. Her eyes, he saw, were a striking shade of blue-green, like the ocean he had seen once when he traveled to San Francisco to sell cattle. Those eyes met his with a mixture of hope and wariness, and she straightened her shoulders as if preparing for judgment. "That was beautiful," Cooper said, his voice rough from disuse. He was not a man who talked much, spending most of his days alone on the range or in the company of his ranch hands who respected his silences. "Thank you kindly, sir," Faye said, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely get the words out. "A coin for another song, if it pleases you." Cooper dismounted, looping his horse's reins over the hitching post. He was wearing a heavy sheepskin coat, warm gloves, sturdy boots, and still the cold bit at him. He could not imagine what this woman was enduring in her thin dress and inadequate shoes. "How long have you been out here?" he asked, stepping closer. "A few hours," she said, not meeting his eyes now. "I will sing as long as folks want to listen." "You are freezing to death," he said bluntly. "I am managing," she replied, lifting her chin with a pride that made his heart ache. "Would you like to hear another carol?" "I know quite a few." Instead of answering, Cooper unbuttoned his coat and shrugged out of it. Before Faye could protest, he had draped it around her shoulders, and the weight and warmth of it made her gasp. The coat was still warm from his body, and it smelled of leather and wood smoke and something else, something clean and masculine that made her feel strangely safe. "Sir, I cannot take your coat," she said, trying to hand it back even as her fingers clutched the thick wool lining. "You will be cold." "I will be inside getting warm in a few minutes," Cooper said. "You need it more than I do. When did you last eat?" The direct question caught Faye off guard, and she felt her cheeks flush with shame. "I had some bread yesterday morning." "Yesterday morning," Cooper repeated, and something dangerous flashed in his gray eyes. "Come with me. The hotel restaurant will still be serving lunch." "Sir, I appreciate your kindness, but I cannot accept charity," Faye said, even as her stomach cramped with hunger at the mention of food. "I have my dignity." "It is not charity," Cooper said. "It is payment for the most beautiful singing I have heard in my entire life. You have earned a meal." He held out his arm, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it took Faye by surprise. She hesitated, looking down at the tin cup with its pathetic collection of coins. She had maybe 15 cents, not enough for a room, not enough for a real meal, barely enough for a loaf of bread that would have to last her several days. "Please," Cooper said, and the word was so simple, so sincere, that Faye found herself taking his arm before she could think better of it. He led her down the snowy street to the Yuba Hotel, a 2-story building with a restaurant that was considered the finest dining in town. Faye had never set foot inside, had only peered through the windows at the white tablecloths and proper dishes and well-dressed diners who inhabited a world completely separate from her own. The warmth inside the hotel hit her like a physical force, and she staggered slightly, her body not knowing how to process the sudden change in temperature. Cooper steadied her with a hand on her elbow, guiding her to a table near the fireplace where flames crackled and popped behind an iron grate. The other diners looked up at their entrance, and Faye saw curiosity and judgment in their faces as they took in her shabby appearance. She wanted to run to escape their stares, but Cooper pulled out a chair for her with such matter-of-fact courtesy that she found herself sitting down, his coat still wrapped around her shoulders. "Two of whatever is hot and ready," Cooper told the waitress who approached their table. Coffee, too. And bring some bread right away. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Martha who had worked at the hotel for 15 years, nodded and hurried away. She recognized Cooper Remington, knew him as a fair man who paid his bills promptly and tipped generously, and she had seen the gentle way he had seated his companion despite her obvious poverty. "Sir," Faye began, but Cooper shook his head. "My name is Cooper. Cooper Remington. I own a cattle ranch about 10 miles north of town." "I am Faye Patterson," she replied, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. "I used to live on a small farm with my father, but he passed 6 months ago, and the bank took the property." "I am sorry for your loss," Cooper said, and the sympathy in his voice sounded genuine. "Do you have other family? Anywhere you can go?" "No," Faye said simply. "My mother died when I was young, and my father was an only child. I have been making do as best I can." The waitress returned with a basket of warm bread and a crock of butter, and Faye had to physically restrain herself from falling on it like a starving animal. Instead, she carefully took a single slice and buttered it with shaking hands, then bit into it slowly, her eyes closing at the simple pleasure of fresh bread and creamy butter. Cooper watched her eat with an expression she could not quite read. There was anger there, but not directed at her. Anger at a world that would let a young woman starve and freeze on the streets. There was also something else, something that looked almost like wonder, as if he could not quite believe she was real. "Where have you been staying?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. Faye swallowed her bite of bread. "The church, mostly. The pastor does not know. I sneak in after he locks up and I leave before dawn. I have been very careful not to disturb anything." "That is not sustainable," Cooper said. "Winter is only going to get worse, and sleeping in an unheated church will kill you." "I know," Faye whispered, "but I do not know what else to do. I have been singing for coins, hoping to save enough for a room, but it is so slow and I need to eat, and the boots I have are falling apart. I thought perhaps by spring I could save enough to buy passage on a stage somewhere, start over in a bigger city where there might be more opportunities for work." The waitress returned with 2 plates piled high with beef stew, thick with vegetables and served with more bread on the side. Faye stared at the plate as if it were made of gold, and when Cooper gestured for her to eat, she picked up her spoon with trembling fingers and took a bite. The stew was rich and savory, the beef so tender it fell apart in her mouth, and she had to fight back tears at the simple kindness of a hot meal. They ate in silence for several minutes, Cooper giving her time to satisfy the worst of her hunger before he spoke again. He had been thinking hard, turning an idea over in his mind that was either brilliant or completely insane, and he still had not decided which. "I have a proposition for you," he said finally, setting down his spoon. "I need a wife." Faye choked on her stew, coughing into her napkin as she stared at him with wide eyes. "Excuse me. I need a wife," Cooper repeated calmly. "I have been running the ranch alone for years now, and it is hard work. I could use a partner, someone to help with the household tasks, the cooking, the garden. Someone who could eventually help me build something lasting, a family maybe, if things worked out between us." "Sir, you do not know anything about me," Faye said, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "You cannot possibly be proposing marriage to a stranger you met on the street." "Why not?" Cooper asked. "People do it all the time out here. Mail-order brides come west to marry men they have never met. At least we have spoken to each other, shared a meal. I heard you sing, and that tells me something about your soul." "What could my singing possibly tell you?" Faye asked, still reeling from his suggestion. "That you have hope," Cooper said simply. "Despite everything you have been through, despite being cold and hungry and alone, you are singing songs about joy and peace. That takes strength of character. It takes faith. Those are qualities I value. You cannot marry someone just because they can sing, Faye said, but her voice was weak, and even she could hear the wavering in it. No, Cooper agreed. But I can offer marriage to someone who needs help and who I believe could be a true partner given the chance. I am not promising you love, Faye. I do not know if I am capable of that kind of feeling anymore. But I can promise you safety, security, a warm home, and enough to eat. I can promise to treat you with respect and kindness. And if over time something deeper develops between us, well, that would be a blessing. Faye set down her spoon, her mind racing. It was insane. She had met this man less than an hour ago, knew almost nothing about him beyond his name and occupation. He could be cruel, could be dangerous, could be lying about everything. But as she looked into his gray eyes, she saw only honesty and a bone-deep weariness that matched her own. He was not a young man swept up in romantic notions. He was someone who had worked hard his entire life and was tired of being alone, just as she was tired of being afraid every minute of every day. "Why me?" she asked. "You could have your pick of women in this town, respectable women with dowries and families." "I do not want a woman who expects me to be something I am not," Cooper said. "I am not a fancy man. I do not go to parties or social gatherings. I work from before dawn until after dark most days. I need someone practical, someone who understands hardship and is not afraid of hard work. I also want someone who has their own reasons for saying yes, someone who is choosing this life because it gives them something they need. That way, we start as equals." "You would really marry me?" Faye asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A woman with nothing to her name." "No dowry, no family, no prospects. I would," Cooper said firmly. "If you are willing to give this arrangement a fair chance to try to build something together, then yes, I would marry you today if you would have me." "Today?" Faye gasped. "That is too fast. I need time to think." "Take all the time you need," Cooper said. "I have to finish loading my wagon, which will take about 2 hours. If you decide you want to accept my offer, meet me at the church at 4 o'clock. The pastor there, Reverend Matthews, is a friend of mine. He will perform the ceremony. If you decide you would rather take your chances on your own, I will respect that decision. Either way, keep the coat. Consider it payment for the beautiful singing." He stood up from the table, leaving money to cover their meal and a generous tip for Martha. Faye remained seated, clutching the edges of his coat, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears and a desperate hope that she was afraid to acknowledge. "Cooper," she said as he turned to leave, and he paused, looking back at her. "Why did you stop? Of all the people who walked past me today, why did you stop and listen?" Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability she had not seen before. "Because that song you were singing was the last thing I heard my mother sing before she died. I had forgotten about it, buried the memory so deep I thought it was lost forever. But when I heard your voice, it all came back, and I remembered what it felt like to have someone care about me, to belong somewhere. I have been alone for a long time, Faye. I am tired of it." He left before she could respond, pushing through the door and disappearing into the snowy street. Faye sat at the table for a long time, finishing her stew slowly, letting the warmth of the fire and the food seep into her frozen body. The other diners had lost interest in her, returning to their own conversations and meals, and she was grateful for the anonymity. She needed to think, to consider every angle of this impossible proposition. Marriage to a stranger was risky, perhaps even dangerous. But what were her alternatives? She could continue singing on the street corners, sleeping in the church, slowly starving and freezing until she collapsed and died on some winter morning. She could try to find work as a maid or a seamstress, but she had been trying for months, and no one wanted to hire a woman without references or a proper place to live. She could attempt to travel to Sacramento or San Francisco, but she had no money for passage and no guarantee of finding anything better in a bigger city. Or she could take a leap of faith and accept Cooper Remington's offer. She would have a home, food, security. She would have a purpose, helping to run a ranch, contributing to something meaningful. And perhaps, if she was very lucky, she might eventually have something else, something she had not let herself hope for in a very long time: a family. She thought about the way Cooper had draped his coat around her shoulders without hesitation, giving up his own comfort for hers. She thought about how he had not looked at her with pity or contempt, but with respect, as if her poverty did not diminish her worth as a person. She thought about the pain in his eyes when he mentioned his mother, and she recognized a kindred spirit, someone who had lost everything and had to claw their way back to something resembling a life. Faye finished her meal and stood up from the table, wrapping Cooper's coat more tightly around herself. She walked out of the hotel and back into the snowy street, but instead of returning to her singing spot outside the Mercantile, she went behind the building and retrieved her carpet bag from its hiding place. Everything she owned was inside: 2 changes of underclothes, a nightgown her mother had sewn, a hairbrush with several missing bristles, a Bible that had been her father's, and a tin daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. It was not much to show for 20 years of life, but it was hers, and she carried it with careful hands as she walked through the snow toward the church. The white steeple rose against the gray sky, and Faye climbed the steps to the front door, pushing it open and stepping into the sanctuary. The interior was cold but sheltered from the wind. An afternoon light filtered through the simple stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the wooden pews. Reverend Matthews emerged from a back room, a kindly man in his 60s with spectacles and a gentle manner. He recognized Faye immediately, though she had thought her nighttime visits to his church had gone unnoticed. "Miss Patterson," he said warmly, "I have been worried about you. I know you have been sleeping here at night." Faye's face flushed with shame. "I am so sorry, Reverend. I did not mean to trespass. I will leave and not return." "Trespass," the Reverend repeated, shaking his head. "Child, this is God's house and all are welcome here. I only wish you had come to me directly. I would have helped you find a better situation." "You have your own congregation to care for," Faye said. "I did not want to be a burden." "You could never be a burden," Reverend Matthews said. "In fact, Cooper Remington spoke to me earlier about performing a wedding ceremony this afternoon. He mentioned a young woman he had met, someone special." "Would that be you?" Faye nodded slowly. "He asked me to meet him here at 4 o'clock if I wanted to accept his proposal. I am early. I wanted time to think, to pray, to be sure I am making the right decision." The Reverend gestured to a pew and they both sat down, the wooden bench creaking beneath their weight. "Cooper is a good man," he said. "I have known him since he was a boy. He has had a hard life, lost his parents young, worked himself nearly to death building that ranch. He can be quiet, sometimes too quiet, and he carries a lot of pain inside. But he is honest and decent, and he has never broken a promise in his life. He wants to marry me because he needs help with the ranch," Faye said. "He was very clear that he is not promising love." "Is that what troubles you?" the Reverend asked. "That he is being practical instead of romantic?" "No," Faye admitted. "I appreciate his honesty. I am troubled because I feel like I would be using him, marrying him for security instead of affection. Is that not wrong?" Reverend Matthews smiled gently. "My dear girl, half the marriages in this world start for practical reasons. Love, when it comes, is a gift, but it is not the only foundation for a good marriage. Respect, kindness, shared goals, those matter just as much. If you believe you can be a good wife to Cooper, that you will work hard and be faithful and try to make a life with him, then you are not using him. You are entering into a partnership with honest intentions. "What if I fail?" Faye whispered. "What if I am not strong enough for ranch life? What if he regrets choosing me? What if you succeed?" the Reverend countered. "What if you find happiness you never dreamed possible? You cannot live your life ruled by fear, Faye. Sometimes you have to take a risk and trust that God will guide you through." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, and Faye closed her eyes, sending up a wordless prayer for guidance. She thought about her father, who had always told her that hope was a choice, something you had to actively decide to hold on to even when everything seemed dark. She thought about her mother, who had loved singing and had taught Faye that music could heal wounds that nothing else could touch. And she thought about Cooper, a stranger who had heard her sing one song and had seen something in her worth saving. The church door opened, and Faye turned to see Cooper entering, brushing snow from his shoulders. He had finished loading his wagon and had changed into cleaner clothes, though they were still simple work clothes, not fancy wedding attire. He carried a small bouquet of winter greenery tied with a strip of cloth, evergreen branches and holly berries that must have taken him time to gather. He saw Faye sitting in the pew and stopped, his gray eyes searching her face for an answer to the question he had not yet asked again. She stood slowly, smoothing down her worn dress, wishing she had something nicer to wear for her wedding day but knowing it did not matter. "I will marry you," she said clearly, "if your offer still stands." The relief that washed over Cooper's face was profound, and he crossed the space between them in quick strides, holding out the simple bouquet. "My offer stands. Thank you for saying yes. I promise I will do everything in my power to be a good husband to you." "And I will try to be a good wife," Faye replied, taking the evergreen branches and holding them carefully. Reverend Matthews stood, his face wreathed in smiles. "Well then, let us not delay. Do you have a ring, Cooper?" Cooper reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "I have kept it all these years, thinking perhaps someday I might have use for it." The ceremony was simple and brief, the Reverend speaking the traditional words while Faye and Cooper stood facing each other in the empty church. There were no guests, no music, no flowers beyond the winter greenery Faye clutched in her cold hands. But when Cooper slipped his mother's ring onto Faye's finger, his hands gentle and steady, she felt something shift inside her chest, a tiny spark of hope kindling into something warmer. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Cooper hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a chaste kiss to Faye's forehead, a gesture so tender that it brought tears to her eyes. She was married now, bound to this quiet rancher for the rest of her life, and she had no idea what the future would hold. "Thank you, Reverend," Cooper said, shaking the older man's hand. "I appreciate you doing this on such short notice." "It was my pleasure," Reverend Matthews said. "Come see me in a few weeks. Let me know how you are both settling in. And Faye, you are always welcome here if you need someone to talk to." Cooper took Faye's carpetbag in one hand and offered her his other arm, leading her out of the church and into the snowy afternoon. His wagon was waiting at the hitching post, loaded high with supplies and covered with a tarp to keep everything dry. He helped Faye up onto the wooden seat, then climbed up beside her, taking the reins of the two draft horses that stood patiently in their harnesses. "It is about a 2-hour drive to the ranch," Cooper said as they started moving. "I have blankets behind the seat if you get too cold." "I have your coat," Faye reminded him, still wearing the sheepskin jacket he had given her hours ago. "Are you not freezing?" "I have been colder," Cooper said with a slight smile. Besides, it looks better on you than it ever did on me." They drove through Yuba City, past the buildings Faye had come to know so well during her months of desperation. The mercantile where she had sung for coins, the hotel where she had eaten her first real meal in days, the bank that had taken her father's farm, the church that had sheltered her at night. She was leaving it all behind now, heading into an unknown future with a man she had met only hours ago. As they left the town and turned onto the road heading north, the snow began to fall more heavily, thick flakes that muffled all sound and turned the world into a soft, white blur. Cooper drove with easy confidence, clearly familiar with every turn and landmark even in the limited visibility. "Tell me about the ranch," Faye said after a while, wanting to break the silence. "What will my days be like there?" Cooper considered the question carefully before answering. "I have 4 men who work for me full-time, good men who have been with me for years. They live in the bunkhouse and take care of the cattle, the fences, the horses. The main house is separate, about a quarter-mile from the bunkhouse. It is not fancy, but it is solid, well built. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a sitting room. There is a garden plot that I have mostly let go wild these past few years because I did not have time to tend it. A chicken coop that is empty right now, but we could get chickens in the spring if you wanted them. I grew up on a farm," Faye said. "I know how to tend chickens, how to grow vegetables, how to preserve food for winter." "That will be helpful," Cooper said. "I can cook basic things, but I am not good at it. The men and I mostly eat meat and beans and bread. It would be nice to have proper meals again. My mother used to make incredible dinners, and I have missed that." "I am a decent cook," Faye said. "My father was appreciative of whatever I made, though I am sure I have much to learn." "We will learn together," Cooper said. "I have never been married before. I will probably make mistakes. I hope you will be patient with me." "I have never been married either," Faye reminded him. "I am sure I will make just as many mistakes. We will muddle through together." They continued in silence for a while, and Faye found herself studying her new husband's profile. He had a strong jaw, slightly weathered skin from years working outdoors, and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor might suggest. His hands on the reins were large and capable, scarred from hard work but gentle in their movements. "Can I ask you something?" Faye said hesitantly. "Earlier, you said you did not know if you were capable of love anymore. What did you mean by that?" Cooper was quiet for so long that Faye thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough. "After my parents died, I was alone for a long time. I threw myself into work, building the ranch, making it successful. I did not have time for courting or socializing. A few years back, I thought I had found someone, a woman from Sacramento who seemed to understand what I was trying to build. We talked about marriage, about a future together. Then I found out she was only interested in my land, in what I could provide for her. She did not care about me at all, just what I represented. After that, I stopped believing in the kind of love the poets write about. I decided practical partnership was all I needed." "I am sorry that happened to you," Faye said softly. "That must have been very painful." "It was a good lesson," Cooper said. "It taught me to be realistic about what I could expect from relationships. That is why I wanted to be honest with you from the start. I do not want there to be any misunderstandings between us." "I appreciate that," Faye said. "And for what it is worth, I am not interested in your land or your money. I am interested in not freezing to death on the street, yes, but also in having a purpose, in being useful, in building something meaningful. If that is all our marriage ever is, a practical partnership, I will be content with that." "Good," Cooper said, and some of the tension seemed to leave his shoulders. "Then we understand each other." The ranch came into view as the afternoon light began to fade, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley between rolling hills. The main house was made of solid timber with a stone chimney from which smoke was rising, suggesting someone had started a fire in anticipation of Cooper's return. The barn was large and well-maintained, and beyond it, Faye could see corrals and outbuildings and what looked like hundreds of cattle dotting the snowy landscape. "It is beautiful," Faye breathed, and she meant it. After months of living on the streets of Yuba City, the ranch looked like paradise, a place of order and purpose and belonging. Cooper drove the wagon up to the main house, and before he could help Faye down, the front door opened and a man stepped out onto the porch. He was perhaps 40 years old, with graying hair and a weathered face, wearing a ranch hand's typical attire of worn jeans and a flannel shirt. "Boss," the man said, nodding to Cooper. "Got your wire about bringing home a wife. Congratulations." "We started a fire in the house and made sure everything was tidy." "Thank you, Jim," Cooper said, helping Faye down from the wagon. "Faye, this is Jim Parker, my foreman. He has been with me since the beginning. Jim, this is my wife, Faye." Jim removed his hat respectfully. "Pleased to meet you, madam. Welcome to the Double R. If you need anything at all, just let one of us know." "Thank you," Faye said, feeling suddenly shy under his curious gaze. "I appreciate that. The boys and I will unload the wagon," Jim said to Cooper. "You take your bride inside and get her warm. She looks half frozen." Cooper nodded his thanks and took Faye's carpetbag, guiding her up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior of the house was warm and welcoming, with simple but well-made furniture and a fire crackling in the stone fireplace. The sitting room opened into a kitchen that was clean and organized, with a cast-iron stove and a table big enough for 6 people. "Let me show you the rest," Cooper said, setting her bag down. He led her down a short hallway where 3 doors open off the corridor. "This is the master bedroom," he said, opening the first door to reveal a room with a large bed, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the ranch. "This will be yours." "Mine?" Faye asked, confused. "Where will you sleep?" Cooper opened the second door, showing her a smaller room with a narrow bed and a simple dresser. "Here. I thought you might appreciate having your own space, at least at first. I do not expect you to share my bed until you are ready, if that time ever comes. We will take this marriage at whatever pace feels comfortable to you." Faye stared at him, overwhelmed by his consideration. She had been expecting him to claim his husbandly rights immediately, as was common in most marriages, and the fact that he was giving her space and time made her eyes sting with grateful tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "That is very kind of you." "It is just decent," Cooper said. "You have agreed to share your life with me, but that does not mean you owe me anything you are not ready to give. We will build trust first, and everything else can come later if it is meant to." He showed her the third room, which was empty except for a few boxes stored in the corner. "I thought this could be a sewing room or a study, whatever you wanted to use it for. Or someday, if we are blessed, a nursery." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implication and hope and uncertainty. Faye nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. "I will let you settle in," Cooper said. "Take your time, look around, make yourself at home. I need to help the men finish unloading and take care of the horses. I will be back in an hour or so, and we can figure out something for dinner." He left her alone in the house, and Faye stood in the hallway for a long moment, trying to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. This morning, she had been homeless and starving, singing for pennies in the snow. Now she was married, standing in a warm house that was apparently her home, wearing a gold ring that had belonged to her husband's mother. She walked back to the master bedroom and set her carpet bag on the bed, then slowly explored the space. The wardrobe was empty, waiting for clothes she did not have. The dresser held a pitcher and basin for washing. The bed was made with clean linens and a thick quilt that looked handmade. Faye sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry, great heaving sobs of relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. She had been holding herself together for so long, trying to be strong and brave and hopeful when she felt none of those things. Now, finally safe, she could let the tears come, could release all the fear and pain and uncertainty she had been carrying. She cried until she had no tears left, then washed her face in the basin and tried to compose herself. She hung up her few items of clothing in the wardrobe, placed her Bible on the dresser, and set the tin daguerreotype of her parents on the small table beside the bed. Then she went to explore the kitchen, wanting to make herself useful. The cupboards were well stocked with basic supplies: flour, sugar, salt, coffee, dried beans, rice. There was a cold cellar access through a trap door in the floor, and Faye climbed down to find shelves lined with preserved vegetables, smoked meats, and sacks of potatoes and onions. It was more food than she had seen in one place since her father died, and she felt another wave of grateful tears threaten. She found everything she needed to make a proper meal and set to work, needing to do something with her hands, needing to contribute in whatever way she could. By the time Cooper returned to the house, stomping snow from his boots and looking tired but satisfied, the kitchen smelled of frying meat and baking biscuits. "You did not have to cook," Cooper said, but his eyes lit up at the sight and smell of the food. "I would have helped you." "I wanted to," Faye said. "I needed to do something useful. I hope you are hungry." "Starving," Cooper admitted. "It smells incredible." They sat down at the kitchen table, and Faye served him a plate piled with fried pork, beans, biscuits, and gravy. It was simple food, nothing fancy, but it was hot and plentiful and made with care. Cooper took a bite and closed his eyes, something like bliss crossing his face. "This is the best meal I have had in years," he said. "Thank you, Faye." "It is just basic cooking," she said, but she felt a warm glow at his appreciation. "I will try to make more interesting things once I learn what you like." They ate in comfortable silence, both too hungry and tired for much conversation. When they finished, Faye started to clear the plates, but Cooper stopped her. "Let me help," he said. "We are partners, remember? That means sharing the work." Together they cleaned up the kitchen, washing and drying the dishes in an easy rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. When everything was put away, Cooper added more wood to the fire and they sat in the sitting room, Faye in a rocking chair and Cooper in a larger chair that was clearly his usual spot. "I know this day has been overwhelming," Cooper said. "Thank you for taking a chance on me on this life. I will do my best to make sure you never regret it." "Thank you for giving me a chance," Faye replied. "I know you could have chosen someone more suitable, someone with better prospects." "I chose exactly who I wanted," Cooper said firmly. "Do not doubt that." They talked for another hour, sharing more about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Cooper told her about the ranch, about his dreams of expanding the herd, of breeding the finest cattle in California. Faye told him about her childhood, about helping her father on the farm, about her mother's love of music, and how singing had always been her way of connecting to memories of her. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them both, and they retreated to their separate bedrooms. Faye changed into her nightgown and climbed into the large bed, which was softer and warmer than anything she had slept in for months. She lay awake for a while, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that this was real, that she was not going to wake up in the cold church vestibule to find it had all been a dream. In the room next door, Cooper lay in his narrow bed and thought about the astonishing turn his life had taken. He had gone into town for supplies and come home with a wife, and he still was not entirely sure what had possessed him to propose to a stranger. But when he had heard her singing, something inside him had recognized a kindred spirit, someone who had been knocked down by life but refused to stay down. He thought about the way she had looked at him when he offered her his coat, the mixture of pride and desperate need in her eyes. He thought about her dignity in accepting his proposal, the way she had walked into the church with her head held high despite her shabby dress and worn boots. He thought about coming home to a warm house and a hot meal, about having someone to talk to at the end of the day, and he felt something in his chest that he had not felt in a very long time: contentment. The next morning, Faye woke to unfamiliar sounds. The lowing of cattle, the whinny of horses, men's voices calling to each other in the distance. For a moment, she panicked, not knowing where she was. Then memory flooded back and she sat up in the warm bed, looking around the room that was now hers. Pale winter sunlight filtered through the curtains, and when she looked out the window, she saw a world transformed by fresh snow. The ranch spread out before her, beautiful and busy, with ranch hands already at work despite the early hour. She dressed quickly in her warmest dress, which was still not very warm, and made her way to the kitchen. Cooper was already there, stoking the fire in the stove, and he turned when he heard her enter. "Morning," he said, and she noticed the careful way he kept his distance, respecting her space. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Faye admitted. "The bed is wonderful. Thank you again for giving me the larger room." "You are welcome," Cooper said. "I usually eat breakfast with the men in the bunkhouse, but I can eat here if you would prefer company." "You should keep your routine," Faye said. "I do not want to disrupt how things work around here, but perhaps I could cook for all of you. It does not make sense for you to have meals in two separate places." Cooper looked surprised. "You would be willing to cook for 5 men every day?" "That is a lot of work." "I need something to do," Faye said. "And cooking for 5 is not much different than cooking for 2, just larger quantities. Besides, it will help me get to know the men who work here, make me feel more like part of the ranch instead of a stranger who showed up out of nowhere." "If you are sure," Cooper said slowly, "the men would certainly appreciate it. We have been eating Jim's cooking for years, and while he tries his best, he is not exactly skilled in the kitchen." "Then it is settled," Faye said. "What time do you usually eat breakfast?" 6 in the morning, noon for lunch, 6 in the evening for dinner," Cooper said. "But those times can be flexible if you need them to be. 6 in the morning is fine," Faye said. "I am used to early mornings. On the farm, my father and I would start work before dawn. Over the next few weeks, Faye settled into a rhythm at the ranch. She woke before dawn each day and prepared breakfast for Cooper and his 4 ranch hands: Jim Parker, the foreman; Tom Williams, a young cowboy in his early 20s; Ben Carter, a quiet man in his 30s; and Sam Houston, an older man who had been working ranches since he was a boy. The men were initially awkward around her, not used to having a woman on the ranch, but Faye's cooking and warm manner quickly won them over. She learned their preferences, their stories, their quirks. Tom was sweet on a girl in town but too shy to court her properly. Ben had a wife and 2 children back in Texas and sent most of his pay home to them. Sam told endless stories about the old days, when the West was even wilder than it was now. Jim, the foreman, became her ally and friend, teaching her about ranch life and answering her questions with patient good humor. Cooper himself remained somewhat distant, always polite and considerate but careful not to push for more intimacy than Faye seemed ready to give. They fell into an easy domestic partnership, working together in comfortable silence. sharing meals and conversation but maintaining separate bedrooms and a certain emotional reserve. Faye threw herself into making the ranch house a home. She scrubbed every surface until it gleamed, organized the cupboards, mended curtains and linens. She dug out the overgrown garden plot and planned what she would plant in the spring. She borrowed fabric from Cooper and sewed herself 2 new dresses, simple but better fitting than the worn garment she had been living in. In the evenings, after dinner was cleaned up and the ranch hands had retreated to the bunkhouse, Faye and Cooper would sit by the fire and talk. Slowly, carefully, they learned each other's histories, their dreams, their fears. Cooper told her about the early years of the ranch, the struggles and setbacks, the small triumphs that had kept him going. Faye told him about her childhood, about her parents' love story, about the pain of losing them both and finding herself alone. One evening, about 3 weeks after their wedding, Cooper came in from the barn carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. He looked almost shy as he handed it to Faye. "I went into town today for supplies," he said. "I saw this and thought of you." Faye unwrapped the package to find a beautiful shawl, thick and warm in a deep blue that matched her eyes. It was finer than anything she had owned in years, and she ran her fingers over the soft wool with something like awe. "Cooper, this is too much," she said. "You have already given me so much." "You needed a proper wrap," Cooper said, looking pleased by her reaction. "And I wanted you to have something nice, something chosen specifically for you. You work so hard, Faye. You deserve to have things that make you happy." Faye stood and wrapped the shawl around her shoulders, feeling the warmth and weight of it settle over her like an embrace. On impulse, she stepped forward and kissed Cooper's cheek, a quick brush of her lips that made him freeze in surprise. "Thank you," she said softly. "I love it." Something shifted between them in that moment, a small crack appearing in the careful walls they had both built around their hearts. Cooper's hand came up to touch his cheek where she had kissed him, and his gray eyes were dark with an emotion Faye could not quite name. "You are welcome," he said, his voice rough. "I am glad you like it." The incident with the shawl seemed to open a door between them, and their relationship began to deepen in small, incremental ways. Cooper started finding excuses to touch Faye, a hand on her elbow as she climbed into the wagon, a brush of fingers as he helped her hang laundry on the line. Faye found herself seeking out his presence, sitting closer to him in the evenings, laughing more freely at his dry jokes. Christmas came, and Faye decorated the house with evergreen branches and holly, filling the rooms with the scent of pine and wood smoke. On Christmas morning, she gave Cooper a pair of warm gloves she had sewn from leather and wool, lined with soft flannel. He gave her a book of poetry, each page carefully chosen from the selections in the Yuba City bookstore. "I remember you said your mother loved to sing," Cooper said as she paged through the book. "I thought you might like poems too. They are like songs written down." "This is wonderful," Faye said, genuinely touched. "Will you read some with me tonight?" They spent Christmas evening by the fire, trading the book back and forth, reading poems aloud to each other. Some were funny, some were sad, some were so beautiful they made Faye's throat tight with emotion. When Cooper read a love poem, his voice hesitant and self-conscious, Faye felt her heart skip a beat. "You believe in that?" she asked when he finished. "That kind of all-consuming love?" Cooper was quiet for a moment. "I used to think I did not. But lately, I have been wondering if maybe I was wrong. If maybe, given time and the right person, those feelings could grow." "I have been wondering the same thing," Faye admitted. "When we married, I thought it would always be a practical arrangement, nothing more. But now I find myself looking forward to seeing you each day, missing you when you are out on the range for long hours. I do not know what to call what I am feeling." Cooper set the book aside and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intent on her face. "What do you want this marriage to be, Faye? Tell me honestly." "I want it to be real," Faye said, her voice trembling slightly. "Not just a business arrangement or a matter of convenience. I want us to be true partners in every sense of the word. I want to know that when you look at me, you see someone you care about, not just someone useful." "I see you," Cooper said, his voice fierce. "I have been seeing you since the moment I heard you sing in the snow. You are not just useful, Faye. You are kind and strong and beautiful, and you have turned this house into a home. I care about you more than I thought I was capable of caring about anyone." "I care about you too," Faye whispered. "I think I am falling in love with you, and that terrifies me." Cooper crossed the space between them in 2 long strides, kneeling in front of her chair and taking her hands in his. "It terrifies me too," he said. "But maybe that is a good thing. Maybe the fact that we are both scared means this is real, that it matters." "It matters to me," Faye said. "You matter to me." "Then let us stop being afraid," Cooper said. "Let us take this leap together and see where it leads." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he kissed her. It was nothing like the chaste kiss at their wedding, but a real kiss, tender and searching and full of promise. Faye melted into it, her hands coming up to frame his face, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "That was worth waiting for," Cooper said, and Faye laughed, a sound of pure joy that made him smile wider than she had ever seen. That night, Faye did not retire to the master bedroom alone. Hand in hand, she and Cooper walked down the hallway together, and when she invited him into her room, he accepted with a reverence that made her feel cherished. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with the same patience they had used to learn each other's hearts. Afterward, lying in Cooper's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, Faye felt a peace she had not known since before her father died. She was home, truly home, in a way that had nothing to do with walls and a roof and everything to do with the man holding her close. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Cooper replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I think I have loved you since I heard you singing in the snow, even though I did not recognize it at the time." Winter gave way to spring, and the ranch came alive with new growth and activity. Faye planted her garden, working the soil with her hands, sowing seeds for vegetables and herbs and flowers. Cooper helped her when he could, finding excuses to work alongside her, stealing kisses when the ranch hands were not looking. The men noticed the change in their boss, the way he smiled more, laughed easier, seemed lighter somehow. They were happy for him, and for Faye, who had become like a sister to all of them, someone they protected and teased and relied upon. In late March, Faye realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week to be sure, then told Cooper one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I think I might be with child," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Cooper's face transformed with joy, and he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Are you sure?" "Fairly certain," Faye said. "We should probably have the doctor come out to confirm it, but all the signs are there." "A baby," Cooper said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy about it?" Faye asked. "I know we have not been married very long." "Happy," Cooper repeated. "Faye, I am more than happy. I am elated, terrified but elated. We are going to be parents." The doctor came out the following week and confirmed what Faye already knew. She was about 2 months along, which meant the baby would arrive in early October, right as fall was settling over the ranch. Cooper immediately became overprotective, trying to stop Faye from doing any heavy work, but she laughed and pushed back against his concerns. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she told him. "Women have been having babies and working at the same time since the beginning of humanity. I will be fine." But she did allow him to fuss over her a little, to bring her cushions and make sure she was eating enough and resting when she needed to. His concern was endearing, a sign of how much he cared, and Faye found herself falling more in love with him every day. Summer arrived in full force, hot and dry, and Faye's belly began to swell with their growing child. She continued to cook for the ranch hands, to tend her garden, to keep the house in order, but she also spent more time resting, sitting in the shade with her sewing or her book of poetry, one hand resting on her expanding middle. Cooper would come in from the range, dusty and tired, and his face would light up when he saw her. He would kneel beside her chair and press his ear to her belly, talking nonsense to the baby, telling it about the ranch, about the horses it would learn to ride, about the life they were building together. "We need to think of names," Faye said one evening in late July when the heat was particularly oppressive and she could not seem to get comfortable. "We are running out of time." "Do you want to wait until we know if it is a boy or a girl?" Cooper asked. "How will we know that before the baby arrives?" Faye asked with a laugh. "Some people say you can tell by how you carry," Cooper said. "You are carrying low and wide, which supposedly means a boy." "Old wives' tales," Faye said dismissively. "I think we should have names ready for both possibilities." They spent the evening throwing out suggestions, arguing good-naturedly over family names and meanings, and what sounded right when paired with Remington. Finally, they settled on choices they both liked: Matthew Cooper Remington if it was a boy, or Caroline Rose Remington if it was a girl. "Caroline was my mother's name," Cooper said softly, "and Rose was yours. It seems fitting to honor them both if we have a daughter." "I love that," Faye said, tears pricking her eyes. Pregnancy had made her emotional, quick to cry over the smallest things, and Cooper had learned to simply hand her his handkerchief and hold her until the storm passed. Labor came on an October morning when the air was crisp and clear, the kind of day that made you grateful to be alive. Faye's pain started just after dawn, and Cooper immediately sent Tom into town to fetch the doctor and the midwife while he stayed by Faye's side, holding her hand and trying not to panic. The labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the night, and Cooper paced the hallway outside their bedroom like a caged animal, wearing a path in the floorboards. Jim finally forced him to sit down, to drink some coffee, to stop imagining all the things that could go wrong. "She is strong," Jim said. "She will get through this." "Women die in childbirth all the time," Cooper said, his voice breaking. "What if I lose her?" "I cannot lose her, Jim. She is everything to me." "You are not going to lose her," Jim said firmly. "Have faith." Just before midnight, a baby's cry pierced the air, strong and healthy, and Cooper was on his feet in an instant. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson, opened the bedroom door with a tired smile. "You have a son," she said. "A big, healthy boy with a strong set of lungs. And your wife did beautifully. She is tired, but she is fine." Cooper pushed past her into the room where Faye lay propped up on pillows, sweaty and exhausted but smiling radiantly. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a blanket, and when Cooper approached, she pulled back the fabric to reveal a red-faced, squalling infant with a shock of dark hair. "Meet Matthew," Faye said. "Your son." Cooper sank onto the edge of the bed, his hands shaking as he reached out to touch the baby's tiny fist. Matthew immediately grabbed his finger with a surprisingly strong grip, and Cooper felt his eyes fill with tears. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are amazing. I love you so much." "I love you too," Faye said. "We did it, Cooper. We made a family." The ranch hands came by the next day to meet the new addition, each one awkward and gentle with the tiny baby, offering congratulations and handmade gifts. Tom had carved a small wooden horse. Ben had sent money he could not spare. Sam had written a letter of advice about raising a son that was both touching and hilarious, and Jim had built a beautiful cradle that would rock beside the bed. "Thank you, all of you," Faye said, touched by their kindness. Matthew is lucky to have so many uncles looking out for him. The first year of Matthew's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small milestones. Faye threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning as she went, asking advice from Mrs. Henderson and the other ranch wives when they came to visit. Cooper was a devoted father, coming in from the range whenever he could to hold his son, to play with him, to simply marvel at the tiny person they had created. He told Matthew stories about the ranch, about his grandparents, about the day he had heard Faye singing in the snow and known his life was about to change. When Matthew was 8 months old, Faye realized she was pregnant again. This time, the news was less surprising but no less joyful, and Cooper welcomed it with the same enthusiasm as before. "I want a big family," he told Faye. "I was an only child and I always wished for siblings. I want our children to have brothers and sisters, to never be alone the way I was." "I want that too," Faye said, "as long as you are prepared to help with all these babies you want to make." "I am prepared to do whatever it takes," Cooper said seriously. "We are in this together always." Their daughter, Caroline Rose, was born in June of the following year. A beautiful baby with her mother's blue-green eyes and a disposition so sunny it was impossible not to smile when she was around. Matthew, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to touch her, to hold her, to show her his toys. The ranch continued to thrive, expanding year by year as Cooper's reputation for breeding quality cattle spread. He hired more men, built additional corrals, invested in better breeding stock. Faye's garden became famous in the area, providing not only for their family and the ranch hands but enough surplus to sell in town, giving her a small income of her own that she took great pride in. When Caroline was 2 and Matthew was 3, Faye became pregnant with their third child. This pregnancy was harder than the others, leaving her exhausted and sick for the first few months, but she weathered it with her characteristic determination and good humor. Their second son, James Henry, was born on a snowy December day 5 years after Faye had stood singing carols in the snow, almost to the exact date. Cooper held his youngest son and looked at his wife, his 2 other children playing on the floor nearby, and felt a gratitude so profound it almost brought him to his knees. "You remember the day we met?" he asked Faye, "when I stopped to listen to you sing?" "I remember every detail," Faye said. "I was so cold, so scared, so certain I was going to die on those streets, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had not even finished praying." "I thought I was being practical," Cooper admitted. "I told myself I was making a rational decision, choosing a wife the way I would choose a horse or a piece of land. But the truth is, my heart knew what my head would not admit. I was already falling in love with you, right there in the snow, listening to you sing about hope and joy when you had every reason to give up." "You saved my life," Faye said simply. "No," Cooper corrected. "You saved mine. I was alive, but I was not living. I was going through the motions, building an empire with no one to share it with. You taught me how to feel again, how to love, how to be part of something bigger than myself. You and these children, you are my whole world." "We are going to need a bigger house soon," Faye said with a laugh, looking around at their growing family. 3 children, 4 ranch hands who eat here regularly, and I have a feeling we are not done yet. "I will build you the biggest house in California if that is what you want," Cooper said. "Whatever makes you happy." "You make me happy," Faye said. "This life, this family, this is everything I never knew I needed. I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Over the next decade, their family continued to grow. Twin girls, Emma and Lily, arrived when Matthew was 6, followed 2 years later by another boy, Thomas. Faye joked that she was going to give birth to an entire ranch crew, and Cooper just laughed and said he would not mind a few more if she was willing. The original ranch house was expanded and rebuilt, becoming a sprawling 2-story home with 8 bedrooms, a proper dining room, and a kitchen large enough for Faye to cook the massive meals required to feed her ever-growing family. The garden expanded to an acre, producing enough vegetables to supply not only the ranch but several families in town. Matthew grew into a quiet, serious boy who loved working with the cattle and dreamed of one day running the ranch alongside his father. Caroline was spirited and fearless, learning to ride almost before she could walk, racing her horse across the range with a skill that made Cooper proud and nervous in equal measure. James was the thoughtful one, always reading, always asking questions, interested in everything from astronomy to medicine. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into trouble with such innocent faces that Faye could never stay mad at them for long. And little Thomas, the baby of the family, was spoiled by his older siblings and doted on by everyone on the ranch. Jim Parker, the foreman who had been there from the beginning, watched the Remington family grow with satisfaction. He had been skeptical when Cooper first brought home a bride he had known for only a few hours, but Faye had proven herself 1,000 times over, becoming the heart of the ranch, the person everyone turned to for comfort, advice, and unfailing kindness. Tom Williams, the shy young cowboy, had finally worked up the courage to court the girl from town, and they were married in a ceremony at the ranch with Faye standing up as a witness and crying happy tears throughout. Ben Carter had saved enough money to send for his wife and children from Texas, and they had come west to start over, eventually buying a small farm near the ranch with a loan from Cooper that he insisted was an investment, not charity. Sam Houston had passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 75, and the entire Remington family had mourned him as the beloved uncle he had become. The Double R Ranch became one of the most successful in California, known not just for the quality of its cattle but for the way it was run, with fairness and integrity, and a genuine concern for everyone who worked there. Cooper paid his men well, provided good housing, and treated them with respect, creating loyalty that lasted generations. Many of the ranch hands stayed for decades, watching the Remington children grow up, becoming part of the extended family. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Cooper took Faye into Yuba City for a rare evening away from the children, who were being watched by a capable housekeeper they had hired as the family grew. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant where he had taken her on the day they met, and afterward he walked her to the spot outside the Mercantile where she had stood singing in the snow. "You ever regret it?" he asked, taking her hands in his. "Saying yes to a stranger? Giving up the possibility of a different life?" Faye looked up at him, at the gray eyes she knew as well as her own, at the face that had become dearer to her than anything in the world. She thought about the frightened, desperate girl she had been, singing for coins with no hope and no future. She thought about the man who had heard one song and had seen past her poverty to the person beneath. She thought about the 15 years they had built together, the children they had raised, the love they had nurtured from the smallest seed into something vast and unshakable. "I have never regretted it for a single moment," she said firmly. "You gave me everything I could have dreamed of and so much more. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Cooper Remington. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Cooper countered. And I want you to know, if I could go back to that day 15 years ago, knowing everything I know now, I would still stop my horse in the middle of the street. I would still listen to you sing. I would still propose to you after one song, because somehow, impossibly, I knew. My heart recognized yours before my mind could catch up. We were meant to find each other, Faye said. I believe that with everything in me. Cooper pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a delicate necklace with a pendant shaped like a musical note. I had this made for you, because your singing brought us together, and I never want to forget that moment when I heard your voice and everything changed. Faye let him fasten the necklace around her throat, blinking back tears. It is beautiful. I will treasure it always. Sing for me, Cooper requested. Just like you did that day, sing me the song that changed both our lives. And there, on the snowy street corner where they had met, Faye began to sing. Her voice was older now, shaped by years of laughter and tears and the thousand small joys and sorrows of life, but it was still clear and true. She sang the carol about silent nights and holy peace, and Cooper stood listening with the same wonder he had felt 15 years ago, falling in love with her all over again. When she finished, he kissed her there in the snow, not caring who might see, and Faye kissed him back with all the passion and tenderness of a love that had been tested by time and had only grown stronger. They were no longer strangers taking a chance on each other. They were partners, lovers, best friends, parents, their lives so intertwined that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Faye's voice eventually began to fade with age, but she taught all her children to sing, passing on the gift her mother had given her. Cooper's hair turned gray, then white, but he remained active on the ranch until he was well into his 70s, refusing to retire completely because the work was too much a part of who he was. Matthew took over the day-to-day management of the Double R when he was 30, running it with his father's integrity and his mother's compassion. He married a school teacher from Sacramento, and they had 4 children who brought even more life and laughter to the ranch. Caroline, true to her wild nature, married a Texas cattleman she met at a cattle auction, and they started their own ranch across the border, staying close enough to visit often. She had 3 daughters who were as fearless and spirited as she had been, and Faye loved watching them grow up, seeing herself reflected in their adventurous souls. James became a doctor, studying in San Francisco and returning to open a practice in Yuba City. He never married, dedicating his life to caring for the sick and injured, but he was a beloved uncle to all his nieces and nephews, and his childhood home was always open to him. The twins, Emma and Lily, were harder to separate even as adults. They married brothers in a double wedding ceremony at the ranch, and they built houses next door to each other in town, raising their combined 6 children as if they were all siblings. Thomas, the baby of the family, took the longest to find his path. He tried ranching, tried business, tried half a dozen different careers before finally discovering a gift for working with troubled horses. He became known throughout California as someone who could gentle the most difficult animals, and he eventually started a breeding program that produced some of the finest horses in the West. Cooper and Faye watched their children and grandchildren thrive, their legacy spreading far beyond the boundaries of the Double R Ranch. They had built something that would last, not just property and cattle and money, but values, traditions, a way of treating people with dignity and respect that their descendants carried forward into the world. On a December evening, 42 years after they had met, Cooper and Faye sat on the porch of their ranch house, wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching the snow fall across the land they had built together. They were both in their 80s now, their bodies worn from decades of hard work, but their minds were still sharp and their love for each other had not dimmed. "You remember that first meal we shared?" Faye asked, her hand in Cooper's. "At the hotel restaurant, when you ordered me hot food, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven." "I remember everything," Cooper said. "The way you looked at that bread as if it were treasure. The pride in your eyes even when you were admitting you had nothing. The moment I knew I was going to marry you." "You really knew that quickly?" Faye asked. "You have said it before, but I still find it hard to believe." "I knew," Cooper confirmed. "Maybe not consciously, not in words I could have articulated, but my soul knew. You were the person I had been waiting for my entire life, even when I did not know I was waiting." "I was so scared," Faye admitted. "So afraid of making the wrong choice, of trusting the wrong person, but you made it easy. You gave me space and time and kindness, and you let me fall in love with you at my own pace." "Best decision I ever made," Cooper said. "Proposing to you after one song, people probably thought I was crazy." "You were crazy," Faye said with a laugh. "We both were. But it was the best kind of crazy." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their youngest grandson play in the snow, building a fort with architectural precision that suggested he had inherited his great-uncle James's logical mind. Inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family. Matthew's wife cooking dinner, Caroline's husband arguing good-naturedly with Thomas about horse breeding, grandchildren running through the halls, great-grandchildren crying or laughing. The ranch house had become a gathering place for the entire extended family, especially during holidays. Sometimes there were 30 people sitting down to dinner, and Faye, despite her age, still insisted on being involved in the cooking, directing operations from a chair in the kitchen while younger hands did the heavy work. "We did good, didn't we?" Cooper said, gesturing to the house, the ranch, the family inside. "We built something worth having." "We did better than good," Faye said. "We built something extraordinary, and it all started with a song in the snow and a cowboy who was brave enough to propose to a stranger." "A rancher," Cooper corrected with a smile. "I was never much of a cowboy." "A rancher who heard one song and changed 2 lives forever," Faye amended. 3 lives, Cooper said. "Don't forget about Matthew and Caroline and James and the twins and Thomas. Our children would not exist if I had ridden past you that day." "Then I suppose we should be grateful you stopped," Faye said. "Grateful for the song, for the snow, for the timing that brought us together at exactly the right moment." "I am grateful every day," Cooper said. "For you, for this life, for every minute we have had together." They fell silent again, and Faye began to hum softly, the melody of the carol she had been singing the day they met. Cooper's hand tightened around hers and he closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. Her voice was thin now, wavering with age, but to him it was still the most beautiful sound in the world because it meant she was still here, still his, still the center of everything that mattered. "I love you, Cooper Remington," Faye whispered when the song ended. "I have loved you for 42 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left." "I love you, Faye Remington," Cooper replied. "You are my heart, my home, my everything. You always have been, from the moment I heard you singing in the snow." Inside the house, someone called them for dinner, but they stayed on the porch a few moments longer. 2 people who had found each other against all odds and had built a life more beautiful than either had imagined possible. The snow continued to fall, soft and silent, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, and in the distance, cattle lowed and horses whinnied, and the sounds of the life they had created together filled the winter air. Finally, they rose and went inside, joining their family for the evening meal. The table was crowded and loud, filled with conversation and laughter, and the occasional argument, but it was full of love, the kind of love that had started with a simple song and had grown into something vast and enduring. As Faye looked around the table at her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, as she watched Cooper at the head of the table, gray-haired and weathered but still strong, still hers, she felt a contentment so complete it brought tears to her eyes. She had been a desperate girl singing for coins with no future and no hope. He had been a lonely rancher who had given up on the possibility of love. Together, they had become something neither could have achieved alone. A family, a legacy, a love story that would be told for generations. The evening passed in warmth and companionship, and when the last guest had gone home and the house was finally quiet, Cooper and Faye made their way to their bedroom, the same master bedroom where Faye had slept alone on her first night as Cooper's wife. They had shared this room for over 4 decades now, and it had become a sanctuary, a place where they could be simply themselves, two people who loved each other completely. They prepared for bed with the ease of long practice, helping each other with buttons and fastenings that arthritic fingers found difficult. When they finally lay down together, Faye curled into Cooper's side the way she had done thousands of times before, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Cooper asked. "For hearing me. For stopping. For seeing something in me worth saving when I could not see it myself. For giving me this life." "Thank you for singing," Cooper replied. "For having the courage to stand in the snow and sing when you were freezing and scared. For saying yes when I proposed. For loving me even when I did not think I deserved to be loved. For being my partner, my wife, my best friend." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, two hearts beating in unison, two lives completely intertwined. And outside, the snow continued to fall on the Double R Ranch, covering the land in a blanket of white, pure and beautiful. A reminder of the day when everything had changed, when a rancher had heard one song and had made a decision that would shape the rest of his life and create a legacy that would endure long after he and his beloved wife had passed into memory. Their story became legend in Yuba City and the surrounding areas, the tale of the rancher and the singing girl, the marriage that started with one carol in the snow and grew into a love that lasted a lifetime. People told it to their children, who told it to their children, and with each telling it became more magical, more romantic, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen in the most ordinary moments, that love can bloom in unexpected places, and that a single decision made with an open heart can change everything.